Woo-hoo! Thanksgiving week is upon us. Turkey Day is Thursday. I'm headed back to Chicago, man, to be with my mama, my sister, my brothers, my nephews, nieces. Man, I'm about to hang out, man. Got my oldest son coming up with me, man. We flying up from the Bay. I leave tomorrow. So I'm going to go ahead and go over our overachievers and underachievers for week 12. Yeah, let's talk about it. Overachievers, we're going to start with for week 12, man. We're just going to go ahead and talk about some magnificent performances put on in week 12 this week, man. Number one, Jayden Daniels. Looking like he may have been a flop till he got in that fourth quarter, and boy, did he explode. Jayden Daniels ends up with 349 yards through the air, 3 TDs, 2 interceptions. He was number one quarterback. And I ain't gonna lie, man, that last 17 seconds left, 86-yard bomb to Terry McLaurin, and Terry McLaurin getting loose, running past defenders. I mean, that was icing on the cake, man. It was icing on the cake because it won me a league and won me a big bet with one of my boys back in St. Louis, man. We kind of beefing right now. He kind of upset with me, but it's all love, man. It's all love, Coley. I love you, baby. You're still my guy, man. Yeah. Number 2 player, Tua Tagovailoa, goes off for 315 yards and 4 TDs, was the number 3 overall quarterback in week 12, man. Ended up with 28.48 points. Shout out to Tua, man. That offense is looking good. They got Achens healthy. Tyreek is healthy. Waddle finally catching ground, man. Got his feet on the ground, and he is running. Make sure Tua's in your lineups, especially when the matchup is looking good. Our number 3 player, first running back, and he went ballistic in week 12. Saquon Barkley, 302 total yards. Oh my God. Man, Saquon Barkley, 302 yards, 2 touchdowns off 30 touches. He is a machine. Number 1 fantasy football running back, and it was by 16 points. This guy was being drafted at the beginning of the second round, and he is putting up a year. He is pacing 2,000 plus yards on the ground. Boy, if I could have got just a little more Saquon this year, man, I feel that I would have won at least 10 championships. This guy, Saquon, is a absolute monster. Get him in your lineups. He's a lock and load. Set it, forget it, love it. Our number 2 running back, number 4 on our over list this week is Josh Jacobs. Josh Jacobs comes through with 106 rushing yards, another 100-yard game, and 3 TDs on 26 touches. Ends up the number 2 overall running back in week 13. He had 28.6 points. Shots out to Green Bay. They are going to keep that ground game rocking. Our number 3 running back, who was number 5 on our list, was Bucky Irving. Bucky is doing his thing in Tampa Bay right now with 151 yards and a TD this week off 18 touches. He don't even need a lot of touches to get that yardage. Let me tell you, Rachaad White is going to get work in that passing game, but I don't see him getting over 8 carries a game. Bucky Irving is their go-to, 24.1 fantasy points, number 3 overall running back in week 13. Get him in your lineups, lock it, love it. Our next player, which is going to be our first receiver, and he went astronomical this week versus the Chicago defense. I ain't see this one coming. Jordan Addison, 162 yards, a touchdown off 8 receptions, the number 1 overall receiver this week. That's right. Justin Jefferson only had 2 receptions. What? 2 receptions? Man, 26.2 points for Jordan Addison. I ain't saying he's a lineup lock, but he's definitely a flex play coming into week 13. Our next receiver on the board, who has been a model of consistency, and I'm so glad I got him, and I'm so glad I started him last week in every league I had him in, Courtland Sutton. I was talking about Courtland Sutton in the preseason, talking about him all during the first couple weeks about how he is a big target in the red zone. Well, Bo Nix has opened up a whole nother dimension for Courtland Sutton. This guy is playing on a high level wide receiver one, top 10 receiver in the league right now. 97 yards, 2 TDs, 8 receptions, 2 he ended up number 2 overall in fantasy scoring, 25.7 fantasy points for receivers this week in week 12. And our next receiver, who I was just talking about earlier, if Tua is the number 3 quarterback overall in fantasy scoring, throwing for over 300 yards, you know it's either Hill or Jaylen Waddle. That's right. Jaylen Waddle goes off for 144 yards and a touchdown on 8 touches. The number 3 overall receiver in week 12. He ends up with 24.4 fantasy points. Jaylen Waddle, this is what your managers have been expecting. Hopefully, it's not too late. Our next player is going to be a tight end. Noah Gray ends up number 1 overall. Who and where was Kelsey in this game? Noah Gray, 66 yards on 4 receptions, 2 TDs, 20.6 fantasy points, and he ended up number 1 overall in fantasy scoring for tight ends. Great game for Noah Gray. Go get him off the waiver wire. And our last but not least, oh boy, he put up some fire for your boy this week. Trey McBride. That's right. Trey McBride throws up 133 yards off of 12 touches. 12 receptions. That's a monster game. He is the number 1 receiver for Kyler Murray. He was number 2 overall tight end this week with 19.3 fantasy points. Those are your top 10 overachievers for week 13. Right now, we're about to talk about our underachievers for week 12. Boy, did we have some letdowns. Underachievers for week 12. We're going to go with number 1, underachiever, Jared Goff. Coming off some great weeks where he's putting up QB top 4 numbers and has a number 22 overall, had 269 yards, 0 TDs, 0 picks. Just not a great day for Jared Goff. They got it done on the ground. Monty and Gibbs, Sonic and Knuckles. They had a day. Jared Goff didn't have to do a lot. It is what it is, man. He's going to have games like this. Their running game is lethal. They don't got to pass if they don't got to, right? Jared Goff ends up number 22 overall, 10.76 fantasy points. Falls outside the top 20. It's going to be better days for Jared Goff. I'm not saying bench him. I'm saying check out the matchup. Our number 2 underachiever, another quarterback, Kyler Murray. Kyler Murray, 294 yards and 0 TDs and an interception. Ended up number 21 overall, fall outside the top 20. Shit, it was only 26 quarterbacks played this week. Yeah, think about those numbers. Our first running back, and boy, did it burn me. He was on my top 5 start list last week, Javonte Williams. Javonte Williams is one of the most inconsistent running backs in the game. He may have 15 points one week, and the next week he have 3. And then come back the next week with 21, and the next week have 4. And the next week have 1. And the next week have it 15. And the next week have another 1. It is bad. I am not wasting my time with Javonte Williams no more. This man had 10 touches, 4 yards, ended up number 52 overall running back, and there were only 13 games this week. Javonte Williams, 1.4 fantasy points. He stunk up the joint. Brian Robinson Jr., not really his fault. The man got injured 3 times in this game. Brian Robinson Jr. ends up with 6 touches, 24 yards, number 39 overall in fantasy scoring for running backs this week with 2.9 fantasy points. Brian Robinson, I just hope you get healthy. I got a lot of stock in you. I need you to get right for these playoffs. Our next running back, who, man, by the way it was looking, should have been a must start last week, Rhamondre Stevenson. Ends up number 34 overall with 8 touches, 13 yards. He salvaged his point scoring with a 2-point conversion. 3.3 fantasy points. That's it. Rhamondre Stevenson should have better days and he should have more touches. But hey, I'm not saying he's a guaranteed start week in and week out. Check out the matchup. Our first receiver off the board, and I had him on my top 5 sit list this week. Deebo Samuel. That's right. Deebo Samuel, 1 reception, 21 yards, number 66 overall receivers with only 13 games. You was 66, bro. Bro had 1 reception, man. Hey, I told y'all to bench him. It is what it is. We'll talk about that on I Told You So. Our next receiver. And this one burned a lot of owners in week 12. Justin Jefferson. Justin Jefferson gets 2 receptions for 27 yards. That's it. This had to be his worst game of the year. Number 60th overall receiver in fantasy scoring with 3.7 points. Jay Jettis is going to have better games. He is never a bench. It is what it is. Chalk it up to the fantasy flop. And our next receiver on the board, last receiver, is Josh Downs. Josh Downs. People were in my inbox asking, hey, should I start him? Should I start him? Should I start Josh Downs? Josh Downs, Josh Downs. Every time I say bench Josh Downs, he goes crazy. It's like Ridley with me, man. Every time I say bench Ridley, he goes crazy. Every time I say sit him, every time I say start him, he flops. Same thing. I start telling people, hey, man, start Josh Downs. Start Josh Downs. Richardson's going to get him on a deep ball. Josh Downs, 3 receptions, 27 yards, number 56 overall. Womp, 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 womp. Josh Downs, 4.2 fantasy points, man. Terrible day. He will have better. And our first tight end off the board and killed me this week is the reason that I lost maybe 2 or 3 leagues. David Njoku. David Njoku with 1 reception, 7 yards, 2-point conversion, good for 3.4 fantasy points. That's it. Number 27 overall, tight end in fantasy scoring with 13 games played. 3.4 points. David Njoku is going to have better days. This was not one of them. And our last player, tied with David Njoku, number 27 overall, with 3 receptions, 19 yards, 3.4 fantasy points, was Sam LaPorta. Sam LaPorta has been subpar, if that, in 2024. He stays on my bench. Yeah. Those are our underachievers for week 12. Also, check us out for our top 5 starts, top 5 sits for the week. It's your boy Hot Soupy, and I'm out.